Hello everyone, and welcome to my Bold and Beautiful Today channel. The broken champagne flute, Hope's tragic secret emerges at Forrester Creations, causing Brooke's world to collapse. The air in the CEO's office at Forrester Creations, which is often filled with ambition and the subtle aroma of pricey leather and flowers, crackled with a strange energy, the oppressive weight of imminent disaster. In order to provide her broken family with the rare moment of togetherness they so desperately needed, Brooke Logan Forrester had planned this small party under the pretense of commemorating a new collection milestone. Ridge was a firm presence at her side, yet his eyes wavered with unsaid stress. With their recent reconciliation still glimmering with fragile newness, Hope, shining in gentle pink, clutched Liam's hand. Steffi, graceful and perceptive, sat on the edge of a sofa, drinking champagne with a careful serenity that belied the undercurrents she surely noticed, while Thomas, ever intense, stood a little aside, his eyes focused on Hope with a dedication that verged on unnerving. A thin veneer covering the deep-seated chasms of betrayal, mistrust, and unresolved sorrow was created by the forced clinking of glasses and whispered pleasantries. Shining in a cobalt blue sheath dress, Brooke stepped between them with her usual warmth and a nearly insane drive to heal the divisions. She raised her flute and said, "Family is everything," her voice shaking a little with the exertion of her belief. Her gaze lingered on Hope and Thomas, a quiet cry for peace, for the past to be finally laid to rest. "Through all the storms, we have each other. That's what matters." Hope looked into her mother's eyes, and Brooke saw it then, not the tender compassion she had anticipated, but a glimmer of something sinister, something tormented, a deep sense of guilt that seemed to emanate from her very being. Brooke's unrelenting pursuit of harmony, which Hope knew was based on terrible deceit, was causing the carefully crafted facade she had worn since her reconciliation with Liam to crumble. Brooke's subsequent innocuous but lethal comment served as the trigger. Her smile was broad and hopeful, completely oblivious to the minefield she had just stepped on. "And seeing you too," she said warmly and naively, between Hope and Thomas, finding a way to work together, to co-parent Douglas with such understanding, it truly heals my heart. It proves forgiveness and moving forward is possible. With his jaw twitching and his eyes darting anxiously to Hope, Thomas shifted. Sensing the abrupt change in the atmosphere, Liam scowled as a familiar shiver of uneasiness ran up his back. Slowly, with her posture straightening and her instincts warning her that the fragile serenity was about to break, Steffi put down her glass. Hope, however, had the most intense reaction. She winced as though she had been hit, the color vanishing from her face so quickly it was frightening. Her champagne flute fell out of her increasingly uneasy hands and shattered on the marble floor in a discordant explosion of golden liquid and crystal that reflected the implosion that was about to happen inside of her. Everyone turned to look at her. "Hope? Honey, what is it?" Brooke said, her voice laced with worry, as she approached her daughter without noticing the cliff yawning in front of her. Hope's breath was shallow, ragged, and hitched. She glanced wildly from Liam, whose face was changing from bewilderment to dawning terror, to Thomas, whose face was now a mask of panic, and then back to her mother. The phrases Brooke had used, forgiveness, moving forward, and understanding, seemed to reverberate harshly in the unexpected quiet, further entangling the blade of her secret. She could no longer bear the pressure, the shame, or the enormity of the deception she had been living. The meticulously built barriers collapsed. Hope broke the illusion Brooke had so laboriously constructed with a voice that was raw, shaking, and heavy with unshed tears. "Forgiveness? Understanding? Moving forward?" she asked, her laugh resonating uncomfortably in the opulent office with a hollow, shattered sound. The allegation lingered in the air, poisonous and immobilizing. "How can we move forward, Mom? How can any of us move forward when everything is built on a lie?" "My lie?" With her palm extended toward Hope, now dangling pointlessly in the gap between them, Brooke froze. Ridge's protective instincts flared as he drew nearer to Brooke. His voice was low and menacing as he questioned, "Hope, what are you talking about?" Liam moved closer and grabbed her. "Hope, sweetheart, whatever it is." Hope flinched back, encircling herself with her arms as though she were holding herself together. She stared into Brooke's eyes, wide with fear and regret, seeking something, forgiveness, censure, anything other than the awful weight of her secret. "The accident, Mom," she said in a murmur that was first almost heard but then became stronger due to her desperation. "Thomas's accident. At the Cliff House. When he fell." The room erupted in a unified gasp. A hand shot to Steffi's mouth. With a look of complete despondency on his face, Thomas closed his eyes. Liam gazed as understanding came to him with nauseating clarity. Brooke's forehead wrinkled in perplexity, followed by deep fear. Brooke asked, her voice tense with anticipation. "What about it, Hope?" "He slipped, he fell," she said. With a fierce shake of her head, Hope let her tears finally fall, slicing through her meticulously done makeup. "No, Mom. He didn't just slip." The silence was agonizing, like a vacuum removing the room's oxygen. Everyone in the room leaned in, ready for the blow. The words tore like glass fragments from Hope's throat as she drew a quivering breath. "I pushed him." The ensuing quiet was profound, absolute, and more weighty than any sound. It sounded like the world coming to a halt. Brooke's face went completely white, her previous warmth giving way to a dreadful emptiness. Her unwavering gaze on Hope seemed to lose all concentration and understanding. The words were a gasp, a ghost of sound. "You, what?" Hope reiterated, "I pushed Thomas," her confession now uncontrollable. "That day, we were arguing, about Douglas, about Liam, about everything. He was backing me into a corner, saying things, horrible things, about keeping me from Liam, about us being meant to be. I snapped, Mom. I shoved him. Hard. I didn't mean for him to fall over the railing. I didn't think." Her voice broke into tears. The full horror of the secret, painstakingly buried for months, exploded into the room with the force of a bomb. "I was so angry, so scared, and then he was falling, and I lied. To everyone. To you. To Liam. To the police. I let everyone believe it was an accident. I let him almost die believing it was his fault," you said. Liam staggered back as though he had been hit, his face a mask of betrayal and incredulity. Steffi sprung up, her eyes burning with rage at Hope and fierce protectiveness for her brother. "You did what?" she yelled out. Thomas stayed motionless, the physical proof of his long-held suspicion striking him hard, his face unreadable, caught between relief and the fresh agony of the fall. The basis of Brooke Logan's reality evaporated rather than just shattering. In an instant, the carefully cultivated image of her kind, caring, morally grounded daughter, the Hope she had vehemently defended against all charges, the Hope she had championed, the Hope whose intrinsic goodness she felt was indisputable, was destroyed. The deed was only one aspect of the reveal, the deep, ongoing deception was the main focus. Hope had acted violently, her own Hope. A man had been almost murdered by Hope. Day after day, month after month, Hope had taken advantage of Brooke's unshakable confidence and love by lying to her face. Brooke saw the fights in which she had comforted Hope over the tragic accident, the hours spent persuading Liam of Hope's innocence, and the times she had defended Hope against Steffi's doubts. It was all a horrible, mocking film loop in her thoughts. All of her words of consolation, her defenses, and her tears for her daughter's suffering were useless and tainted by the truth. Hope's treachery was not only directed at Thomas, it was also directed at her, the foundation of their mother-daughter relationship, and the essential principles that Brooke felt characterized their family. Hope's beloved recollections as a kid, a young woman, and the personification of Logan goodness and grace clashed brutally with the vision of Hope pushing Thomas, the sound of his body hitting the rocks below, and the months of planned falsehoods. The moral harm was too great, the cognitive dissonance too great. Already throbbing like a caged bird across her ribs, her heart seemed to stutter, skip, then speed wildly. Her breath was taken away by a crushing pressure that developed in her chest and spread outward. The room's vivid hues, including Hope's pink clothing, the striking artwork, and the rich wood, blended and swirled into an unsettling kaleidoscope. Ridge's frantic call for her name sounded twisted and muted, as though it were coming from below. "Brooke? Brooke! Look at me. She attempted to concentrate on his face, swimming in her field of vision, but all she could see was his scared eyes reflecting the tragic reality. Her legs, which had just been giving her Logan-like resolve, turned to water. The world's axis tipped dramatically. There was no soft fading, no elegant sigh. The collapse was abrupt and horrifying. Her body went completely slack, crumpling like an abandoned doll, and her eyes rolled back, revealing just the whites. A faint groan escaped her lips. Ridge sprang, his arms barely catching her dead weight before she hit the merciless marble floor with a horrible thud. She tumbled backwards, her head barely avoiding the sharp corner of her towering desk. The symphony of devastation her daughter's words had caused was completed with a final, harsh clink as her champagne flute, which she had miraculously managed to hold on to until that last second, finally collapsed. In a matter of seconds, the joyous occasion had devolved into a scene of mayhem and terror, leaving a cherished matriarch unconscious on the ground, the heartbreaking reverberation of Hope's confession looming over the broken family like a shroud. Brooke Logan's consciousness, her faint physical manifestation of her reality, her ideals, and her heartbreaking irreversibly were the first casualties of the shocking secret that had been revealed. The gilded cage breaks. Brooke and Ridge discover Steffi's hopeless deception in a betrayal storm, speculative spoiler scene. With the late afternoon sun casting long, accusing shadows across the smooth surfaces where Steffi Forrester Finnegan had painstakingly built a fortress of control, the imposing CEO office of Forrester Creations, often a bastion of power and flawless strategy, was uncomfortably still. With her distinctive cobalt blue silk blouse appearing too vivid against the strained pallor of her face, Brooke Logan Forrester paced with a restless urgency. As he struggled with the sneaky murmurs of doubt that had turned into a thunderous roar, Ridge Forrester stood at the panoramic window with his back to the room, shoulders tense, the vista of the Los Angeles skyline fading into an indistinct haze. Instead of deal-making or design inspiration, the air hummed with the oppressive weight of a reality that was purposefully hidden, a secret that their own daughter, their tough, protective Steffi, had done everything in her power to keep hidden. Now, the piece of their recent reunion, the brittle hope that had blossomed after so much family conflict, felt like a cruel delusion covering a huge divide. Steffi's eyes had flinched when Finn's name was mentioned, her eyes had a sharpness that deflected questions about Kelly's quietness after spending a weekend at the Cliff House, her eyes had a forced cheerfulness that didn't reach them, and, most damningly, she flinched almost imperceptibly whenever Sheila Carter's specter was brought up, even in passing. The alteration seemed to Brooke like a change in barometric pressure before a storm, as she had developed a mother's intuition through decades of Logan conflict and Forrester intrigue. At first dismissive, Ridge attributed it to Steffi's residual trauma from Sheila's previous attacks, but his confidence was eroding under the constant pressure of Brooke's anxiety and his own persistent observations, the way Steffi guarded her phone, the mysterious, short-lived absences, the subtle but noticeable wall she'd put up between herself and them regarding Finn and the kids, a wall that hadn't been there before. A child's harmless comment had been the catalyst, the seemingly inconsequential rock that set off the avalanche. Kelly had been coloring carefully at a rare, laid-back family meal at Eric's mansion when she looked up abruptly, her little voice interrupting the grown-up discourse. She had whispered, more to her crayon than to anyone else, "Mommy was so scared when the lady got hurt saving me." Instead of going silent, the table fell into a void. The color had faded from Steffi's face more quickly than Brooke had ever seen. In a desperate attempt at redirection that felt more like smothering, Steffi had taken Kelly into her arms and smothered her with kisses, saying, "Kelly, sweetheart," in an abnormally high and strained voice. "Remember, we talked about that? That was just a dream, honey. A silly dream." Finn, who was seated next to her, had appeared momentarily perplexed before becoming concerned and putting a comforting touch on Steffi's elbow. He was obviously buying the dream explanation but was concerned about her obvious suffering. But across the table, Brooke and Ridge met eyes. "Preserving me?" The words reverberated. The only lady whose link with threat to Kelly would cause Steffi to react so strongly was Sheila Carter. Saving as well? In Steffi's perspective, that verb had no place near Sheila Carter. It was the dam's fisher. Brooke began a quiet, unrelenting investigation. He asked Finn gentle, probing questions that showed he was unaware of any recent incidents involving Sheila and Kelly. He also made discreet inquiries at the hospital where Steffi worked, which led to dead ends but strengthened the feeling of purposeful concealment. Brooke watched Steffi closely, noting the shadows under her eyes, her jumpiness, and the way she clung to Finn and the kids as though they were going to be torn away. At first reluctant to accept that Steffi would be so blatantly dishonest with them, particularly on something involving Sheila, Ridge eventually gave in to the overwhelming evidence and Brooke's agonized demands. He used resources Steffi wouldn't have thought of, calling in a discreet, reliable tech contact instead of going through the usual channels. The request was specific: traffic camera footage from a date that roughly corresponded to Steffi's sudden change in behavior and Kelly's odd comment near the Forrester Cliff House. It was painful to wait. Haunted by fragmentary possibilities, each worse than the last, Brooke was unable to sleep. Ridge chain-smoked on the terrace, the lines on his face growing deeper as the weight of maybe discovering his daughter's treachery clashed with his instinctive need to shield his family from Sheila's constant danger. With Brooke hanging behind him, her hand holding his shoulder so hard that her knuckles were white, Ridge opened the encrypted file in his private home office when it eventually arrived. The familiar beach road appeared in the shaky video. Then there was a blur of movement close to the edge of the cliff, and it was Kelly's little figure, teetering dangerously close to the plunge. They both felt a shock of fear. Another figure sprang into the frame with startling quickness before they could even comprehend the terror, grabbing Kelly and yanking her back while losing their own balance and falling over the edge. Ridge stopped the frame, zooming in with shaking fingers on the hand that had held Kelly's arm right before the fall, even though the figure was hidden by the rapid movement and build. The clear, jagged scar across the knuckles, Sheila Carter's notorious, permanent mark, was obvious even in the low resolution. Kelly had been saved by Sheila. Sheila was down. Steffi was also aware. It was hidden by Steffi. The journey to Steffi's cliff home was a somber and quiet one. Brooke gazed straight ahead while silently crying over the risk Kelly had encountered as well as the heartbreaking knowledge that Steffi had decided to lie, to bear this burden alone, and to conceal Sheila's possible survival, or death. Ridge's jaw was clenched so tightly it hurt, and his hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel. Steffi's complete lack of faith in them, her parents, and her allies in defending their family was the betrayal, not simply the secret. It was the deliberate choice to deceive them into thinking Sheila was absent or unoccupied as she dealt with a nightmare by herself. They saw Steffi reading a storybook to a drowsy haze in the living room while trying to maintain some sort of normalcy while drenched in the golden hour light. Finn smiled warmly and unknowingly as he cleared away the supper plates. Steffi said, "Mom, Dad. This is a surprise," her own smile wavering as she observed their faces, the strange silence, the storm building in Brooke's eyes, the cold rage hardening Ridge's face. Her urge for protection flared, and she gently moved Hayes closer. Ridge said, "We need to talk." Now, in a low, menacing voice that was without its customary warmth. Finn hesitated, feeling the change. "Is everything okay?" Bypassing the small talk, Brooke took a step forward, her voice shaking not with fear but with the power of revelation and deep pain. Steffi's facade clearly broke when she said, "Kelly mentioned something. About a lady saving her. About getting hurt." Her eyes blazed with panic. "Don't." Brooke interrupted her, the statement abrupt and decisive. "Brooke, I told you, that was just a..." Ridge came to stand next to Brooke, forming a united front against their daughter's deceit. "Don't you dare lie to us again, Stephanie. Not about this. Not about our granddaughter. We saw the footage, Steffi." Steffi's face became absolutely white. She appeared to have suffered a physical injury. Sensing the strain, Hayes let out a whimper. Finn moved forward, startled and completely bewildered. "Footage? What footage? What's going on?" "The footage," Ridge went on, staring into Steffi's eyes, "of Sheila Carter saving Kelly's life. Of Sheila going over the cliff." Finn flinched, astonishment and disbelief battling with his features. He looked at his wife and saw the fear, the shame, and the confirmation in her unwillingness to look him in the eyes. Sheila? Saving Kelly? But, she's dead. Steffi said. He murmured. Steffi? Is this true? The dam cracked. In a desperate, tearful torrent, the secret Steffi had so fiercely defended, the weight she had carried alone, and the lies she had made to shield her family from the terrible truth and the possible consequences of Sheila's death or survival came tumbling out. Steffi gasped, holding Hayes closer. She saved her. Kelly slipped, it was so fast. Sheila came out of nowhere, she grabbed her, but she fell, over the edge, onto the rocks. Brooke winced at the awful sight. I saw her, down there, she wasn't moving, there was so much blood. Oh, Steffi. I panicked, let out Steffi in a strained voice. Sheila Carter. The woman who shot me. Who shot Finn? Who terrorized us? Saving Kelly? It didn't make sense. It couldn't be real. And if she was alive, if she survived again, after that, what would she want? Retribution? Kelly? Or if she was dead, because she saved my daughter. Her voice began to sob. The police, the questions. Finn knowing his mother died saving our child, the press, the chaos. Sheila winning even in death by twisting everything. I couldn't. I just wanted her gone. Finally, permanently gone. I wanted to believe she was dead. I needed to protect us. Protect Kelly from ever knowing that monster touched her. Protect Finn from that impossible guilt. Protect all of us from the madness. She looked wildly between Ridge and Brooke. Don't you understand? I did it for us. For our family. The repercussions of her revelation caused a deafening hush to follow. Finn stood motionless, trying to comprehend the unthinkable, his biological mother, who caused him so much suffering, giving up her life for his stepdaughter. The moral chasm was enormous. Brooke gazed at her daughter with a deep, soul-deep disillusionment rather than the typical maternal comfort. You did it for us? Brooke asked in a voice that was dangerously quiet but filled with rage stemming from broken trust. Steffi, you lied to us. You manipulated us. You let us believe Sheila was out there somewhere, a lurking threat, or safely gone, while you carried this atomic secret. You shut us out. Your own parents. Brooke's voice was sobbing. Ridge's voice was a low growl, vibrating with a paternal rage mixed with crushing disappointment. You didn't trust us to stand by you? To help you navigate this impossible thing? Instead, you chose deception. You chose isolation. You chose to let Sheila Carter, even in death or disappearance, control the narrative, control you, by forcing you into this lie. You covered up a crime scene, Steffi. You potentially obstructed justice. You left your mother and me completely in the dark about a threat to our granddaughter and the reality of what happened. You made decisions that affect this entire family based on fear and panic. Do you have any idea the position you put us all in? Legally? Morally? Steffi collapsed beneath the assault, the consequences of her deeds thumping her. The powerful CEO and protective lioness was reduced to a shaky figure who was crying and holding to her youngster. Finally, broken, Finn found his voice. I was scared. I am scared. I thought I was making it stop. Steffi's meticulously built world was crumbling, not crumbling. Steffi, why? Why didn't you tell me? I'm your husband. Sheila was, my mother. I deserved to know. The desperate act she thought was her sole defense, her secret, had turned into the weapon that destroyed her parents' confidence and possibly her marriage. With the devastating reality of Sheila's last, deranged act and Steffi's disastrous decision to hide it finally revealed, Brooke and Ridge stood together, united in their anguish. A family was split apart, not by an outside monster this time, but by the terrible decisions of one of its own members, as the gilded cage of Steffi's secret lay in ruins all around them. The battle lines were no longer drawn against Sheila, rather, they were drawn directly through the Forrester family's heart, driven by fear, treachery, and the painful question of whether trust could ever be restored after being so thoroughly destroyed by such a profound secret. The fallout was barely getting started.